Welcome to today's webinar, Revisiting the California English Language Development Standards, or we'll refer to them as the California ELD Standards. This is the first of 5 webinars regarding the California ELD Standards. This webinar will provide an orientation to the California ELD Standards that will include an overview of the proficiency level descriptors and parts 1 through 3 of the ELD Standards. We welcome teachers, administrators, instructional coaches, professional learning providers, and anyone who is new to the California ELD Standards or who would like to revisit the ELD Standards. My name is Gustavo Gonzalez. I'm an education program consultant in the Language Policy and Leadership Office, or LPLO, in the Multilingual Support Division at the California Department of Education, otherwise known as the CDE. I will be presenting today's webinar along with my co-presenter, Christine Snyder.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Gustavo. As Gustavo mentioned, my name is Christine Snyder, and I'm with the Region 15 Comprehensive Center at WestEd. Just to give a little context, thank you. The Region 15 Comprehensive Center is one of 19 federally funded regional comprehensive centers. And the leadership and staff at the Comprehensive Center provide capacity building technical assistance to state educational agencies. And the Comprehensive Center collaborated with the CDE as thought partners on this project. It's a real pleasure to be here today. And now a message from the director of the Multilingual Support Division.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Gustavo. It's my pleasure to be here with you all today. I'm Alicia Moreno Ramirez, and I'm really encouraged by the high interest in and participation of so many California educators at today's session of the English Language Development Standards webinar series. I'm watching the participant number climb. It's really enthusiastic. We're so grateful to have you all here in the virtual room, and it's hard to believe that it's been nearly 14 years since the inception of the California ELD standards, and we're very excited to introduce anew these concepts to the evolving education community. I wanted to thank the MSD Language Policy and Leadership Office and the wider MSD team for contributing to this effort, and specifically to Gustavo for leading this series, to Christine and the Region 15 Comprehensive Center for supporting our capacity, and of course, to you all for attending and prioritizing the interest of California's 1.1 million English learner classified students. Enjoy today's learning, and we look forward to watching the ELD standards continue to take root as part of ELD instruction and EL roadmap policy implementation. So let's have a great session.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alicia. So today there will be opportunities to ask questions during today's session. So we'll answer as many questions as we can toward the end of today's webinar. And you can submit your questions in the question and answer or Q&A feature. We'll also post frequently asked questions, or FAQs, on the CDE English Language Development, or ELD, standards webpage at a later date following today's webinar. And we'll post in the chat the link to the ELD standards webpage. Another way is to email your questions to the Language Policy and Leadership Office email address at lplo@cde.ca.gov. And we'll post in the chat the LPLO email address. And in addition, we programmed opportunities to reflect on today's content and post a response to the reflection prompt in Padlet. And we're going to post in the chat the link to Padlet. And the ELD standards webpage is available at a link, https://www.cde.ca.gov. And you can email us at lplo@cde.ca.gov. And the Padlet is also available at the link in the chat. So, and now we're going to take a few moments to see who is in attendance for today's webinar. And a poll will appear on your screen. So please complete the poll by identifying what your role or position is at your local level. Now, if the poll does not feature your role or position, please select Other. I want to highlight, I just want to, one technical piece. I think I'm seeing a box on the screen. Is anyone else noticing? Just to highlight, maybe that's just me. I want to make sure all the folks can see, but so the poll will show, there you go. The poll will show the following options: teacher, paraeducator, site administrator, instructional coach, professional learning provider, district administrator or staff, county office administrator or staff, teacher education faculty, community organization member, school board member, other. So we're going to give you a minute to post who is in attendance. And let's give it maybe 15 more seconds, and we can close it. All right, let's see who's joining us. Okay, joining us today are 51% teacher, paraeducator, site administration, or instructional coach. Fantastic, welcome. 26% county office of ed administrator, teacher education faculty, community organization member, or other, and 23% professional learning provider, district administrator, or school board member. Thank you so much to everybody, especially want to center the voices of our teachers and instructional folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, so before we jump into the content, we would like to find out more about your knowledge of the ELD standards. So a second poll is going to appear on your screen. So please complete the poll by identifying what is your level of familiarity with the California ELD standards, all right? Please select the best answer that reflects your level of familiarity. I'm really curious just to get a sense of how are folks entering. And let's give it 15 seconds. And, oh, this is fantastic. All right, thank you for completing that poll. I see 83% somewhat knowledgeable. That is really great, and I'll tell you why, because the entire point of this webinar is building our collective capacity and expertise around the standards. 5% folks reporting expertise, feeling like an expert. That is wonderful, and that is exactly why this webinar is a great thing for us all to be participating in. So, and now I'm going to invite Gustavo to take it away.
Thank you, Christine. So the goals for today's webinar are to provide an orientation to the California English Language Development Standards, the California ELD standards, and to highlight the proficiency level descriptors and parts 1 through 3 of the standards. We hope that participants will be able to explain the importance of the California ELD standards, gain a high-level overview of the content and each of the 6 chapters of the publication, and identify key information regarding the proficiency level descriptors and part 1, part 2, and part 3 of the ELD standards for grades kindergarten through grade 12. We'll refer to that as K through 12. The target audience is new and veteran teachers and administrators who are new to the California ELD standards or would like to revisit the California ELD standards. We also welcome instructional coaches, professional learning providers, and anyone who is new to the ELD standards or who would like to revisit the ELD standards. So we posted in the chat a link to the CDE webpage where you can access the PDF version of the California ELD standards. You click, and if it takes you to the ELD standards webpage, click on the ELD standards tab, and then there you will see a link to the PDF version of the standards. The California ELD standards webinar series includes 5 webinars in total. Just like the photo on the left of the slide shows an overview of a baseball field, today's webinar will provide a high-level overview of the ELD standards and the publications chapters. And just like the picture on the right shows a baseball on a baseball plate, the remaining webinars that will be presented from February to May of 2024 will provide a deeper dive into the proficiency level descriptors, the ELD standards part 1, part 2, and part 3, and other valuable content from each chapter of the publication. Future webinar dates and registration links will be provided later in this webinar. So why are we here today? Christine will provide some insight as to why we program these webinars for the ELD standards and why now. So we're going to look at some data. Go ahead, Christine.
Thank you so much, Gustavo. So why are we here? Last year, the Observation Protocol for Teachers of English Learners, or OPTEL, was field tested. And WestEd surveyed field test participants, the majority of whom were classroom teachers. One survey question asked them this: how familiar are you with the California ELD standards? And the bar graph on the slide shows responses. 103 participants reported being very familiar. 71 reported being somewhat familiar. 6 reported being not so familiar, and 1 reported being not at all familiar. Our goal is to have all teachers feel very familiar with the ELD standards. And we're going to put in the chat a link to the Optel webpage. And WestEd also asked the field participants another question. Overall, how confident do you feel? Actually, let's go to, let me make sure we're at the, yeah, go ahead. Let's go to the next slide that gives the second bar chart. Yeah, there we go. So I want to highlight the second question. All right. So overall, how confident do you feel in your ability to design and deliver effective instruction for English learner students? The bar graph on the slide shows that 117 participants felt very confident, but 64 felt somewhat confident. And no one responded that they were not so confident or not at all confident. And again, our goal is to support teachers so that all feel very confident in their ability to design and deliver effective instruction for EL students. And you can find the data presented in these graphs and other data from the field test in the Optel validation study, which is available on the CDE website. And we'll post in the chat a link to that Optel validation study. And with that, the next section, Gustavo's will help us frame the importance of the ELD standards and why educators need to be experts on them.
Thank you, Christine. So we need to examine why the ELD standards matter. The circle shown on the slide is split into 6 equal parts. Beginning at the top and moving clockwise, each section is labeled law, policy, English Language Arts, English Language Development Framework, or we'll refer to it as the ELA-ELD framework, Optel, English Language Proficiency Assessments for California, known as the LPAC, and teaching and learning. Each part represents an important element as to why the ELD standards matter. They matter because it's the law to have ELD standards. There is state policy that highlights the ELD standards as an equitable instructional resource for educating EL students. And the ELA-ELD framework supports the implementation of the ELD standards for providing integrated and designated ELD instruction. They matter because the design of the Optel tool is aligned with the ELD standards and the LPAC. ELD instruction guided by ELD standards will prepare students to achieve on the LPAC. And the ELD standards provide equitable opportunities for EL students to reach English language proficiency as fast as possible and have access to the content in the standard instructional program. So it's federal law. We will begin with federal and civil rights legal obligations for EL students. Castañeda versus Picard 1981 case law determined that local educational agencies, or LEAs, have a dual obligation to support EL students to overcome language barriers, to reach proficiency in English, and to recoup academic deficits that may be incurred while learning English so that students can reach the same academic achievement goals. The purpose of the Title III EL student program is to ensure that all EL students attain English proficiency, develop high levels of academic attainment in English, and meet the same challenging state academic standards as all other students. And the Equal Educational Opportunity Act of 1974 ensures that LEAs provide EL students access to educational programs. We will post in the chat the legal citations for each. It's state law. For California Title V Code of Regulations, Section 11300, integrated ELD is instruction in which the state adopted ELD standards are used in tandem with the state-adopted academic content standards. Designated ELD is instruction provided during a time set aside in the regular school day for focused instruction on the state-adopted ELD standards to assist EL students to develop critical English language skills necessary for academic content learning in English. And we will post in the chat a link to the California Title V Code of Regulations, Section 11300. More state law, in accordance with the California Education Code, Section 60811, the California State Board of Education, or the SBE, adopted the standards for ELD that correspond to the State English Language Arts, ELA standards in November 2012. Education Code Section 60811 requires that the ELD standards align with the state content and achievement standards in mathematics and reading language arts and science. In addition, Assembly Bill 899 required the State Superintendent of Public Instruction to recommend to the SBE any modifications to the California ELD standards to ensure language rigor in accessing the mathematics and the next generation science standards. And just to note, no modifications were needed. In addition, Education Code Section 60810 indicates that the initial and summative LPAC shall be aligned with the SBE adopted ELD standards. So we will post in the chat links to the ELA, the math, and the science standards. And why does it matter? Because it is state policy. The ELD standards are important because they are an essential part of the California EL roadmap policy, particularly with Principle 2, intellectual quality of instruction and meaningful access, and the Principle 2 elements. Element 2A, integrated and designated ELD, where language development occurs in and through subject matter learning, and is integrated across the curriculum, including integrated ELD and designated ELD. Element 2B, intellectually rich standard-based curriculum, where students are provided a rigorous, intellectually rich, standards-based curriculum with instructional scaffolding that increases comprehension and participation and develops student autonomy and mastery. Element 2C, high expectations. Teaching and learning emphasize engagement, interaction, discourse, inquiry, and critical thinking with the same high expectations for EL students as for all students in each of the content areas. And element 2F, rigorous instructional material support high levels of intellectual engagement, where explicit scaffolding enables meaningful participation by EL students at different levels of English language proficiency. Integrated language development, content learning, and opportunities for bilingual and biliterate development are appropriate according to the program models in which our students are enrolled in. And we will post in the chat a link to the California EL roadmap policy. On this slide, you see the ELA, ELD framework circles of implementation. The circles of implementation set the context for the implementation of the standards so that students can reach the overall goals of ELA and ELD instruction. By the time California students complete high school, they have developed readiness for college, career, and civic life. They have attained the capacities of literate individuals, have become broadly literate, and acquired the skills for living and learning in the 21st century. In the center are the California ELD standards. They help support EL students to meet and excel in ELA content, which we'll refer to as a California Common Core State Standards for ELA literacy, or the CCS for ELA. And we're going to refer to them in this webinar as the ELA standards. And language is central to communication, understanding, and participation in learning. In addition, the language needs guide the instructional planning. So instructional practices include the observation of student progress to ensure that EL students have full access to the ELA curriculum and other content curriculum. The OPTEL would be a useful tool to observe student progress in English language proficiency and academic use of English in content area classrooms. We're going to put in the chat a link to the ELA ELD framework. The California ELD standards amplify the ELA standards because EL students need to have a purpose for using language. So for all students, it would be a social function. But EL students, they need to know how to use the language meaningfully, and they need to know how to access resources to be knowledgeable of the language in order to be precise in language use to convey exact meaning. The ELA and ELD standards both integrate reading, writing, speaking, listening, and comprehension as expressed in the key themes of meaning making, language development, effective expression, content knowledge, and foundational skills. The ELD standards support EL students to use English purposefully. They support EL students to use language to interact meaningfully in school and beyond. And they also support EL students to be knowledgeable about English and utilize language as a resource for communicating and learning. And now Christine will discuss the next few slides.
Thank you so much. So again, we're in this section, framing the importance, right? So why do the ELD standards matter? And we have 131 folks on this Zoom today. So it's exciting to be talking about all these reasons. Here's another reason why the ELD standards matter. The OPTEL is aligned with them. So the OPTEL is designed for educators to determine and document a student's proficiency in English language expressive skills, that's speaking and writing, and receptive skills, that's listening and reading. And as indicated in this slide, the OPTEL actually makes explicit which ELD standards are addressed by each. So for receptive skills, and again, that's listening and reading comprehension, the K-12 ELD standards addressed are Part 1, standards 1 through 8, and Part 2, standards 1 through 7. And for expressive skills, and that's speaking and writing, the K-12 ELD standards addressed are Part 1, standards 1 through 4 and 9 through 12, and Part 2, standards 1 through 7. And another reason why they matter is, per state law, the LPAC aligns with the ELD standards. And the LPAC blueprints make explicit the primary and secondary ELD standards aligned with each task type. And this slide presents an example from the blueprint for the speaking domain on the summative LPAC. So as noted in the first row, the blueprint identifies each task type, right? So it's aligned, it's aligned primary ELD standard or standards, right? Appears next. And then it's aligned secondary ELD standard or standards. And then the second row here on the slide provides an example for the talk about a scene speaking domain task type for grades 6 through 8. And it notes that its aligned primary ELD standard is Part 1, Strand A, Collaborative, Standard 1, Exchanging Information and Ideas. And its 3 aligned secondary ELD standards are Part 2, Strand B, Expanding and Enriching Ideas, Standard 3, Using Verbs and Verb Phrases, Part 2, Strand B, Standard 4, Using Nouns and Noun Phrases, and Part 2, Strand B, Standard 5, Modifying to add details. And we'll post into the chat a link to the test blueprints for the summative LPAC, where you can find this information for all task types across K through 12. Very important and valuable resource, the test blueprints. And finally, I think we had something like 51% participants, teachers, instructional folks. The ELD standards matter for teaching and learning. And they describe the key knowledge, skills, and abilities that students who are learning English as a new language need in order to access, engage with, and achieve in grade level academic content. and they provide challenging content in ELD for EL students to gain proficiency in a range of rigorous academic English language skills. Now, a key point to emphasize is that the ELD standards do not repeat or replace the ELA standards, nor do they represent ELA content at lower levels of achievement or rigor. Okay, rather, this is real important, right? They amplify the language, knowledge, skills, and abilities in the ELA standards that are essential for EL students to succeed in school while they are developing their English. Now, to be clear, standards matter in all teaching and learning contexts. We've been focusing on the ELD standards, but here are some voices from experts just on the importance of standards for teaching and learning in general. So Grant Wiggins, co-author of Understanding by Design, notes that standards play a critical role by providing a framework for educators to develop curriculum, guide instruction, and assess student learning effectively. And Carol Ann Tomlinson, author of The Differentiated Classroom, writes, standards help ensure consistency and rigor in what is taught and learned. They serve as a compass, right? Standards as a compass guiding the educational journey. But for teachers of EL students specifically, the California ELD standards are essential to providing high quality integrated and designated instruction. So why? Well, they set clear development benchmarks that reflect EL students' English language proficiency. They provide teachers with a foundation for delivering rich instruction and a framework to guide development of ELD assessment systems. And they provide parents and families with a tool for discussing learning progress. So now that we've talked about why they matter, in this next part, Gustavo will provide an orientation to the chapters in the California ELD Standards publication.
Thank you, Christine. So we will begin with Chapter 1. So we're looking at the publication as a whole. Chapter 1, Purposes, Development, and Structure of the English Language Development Standards. And that begins on page 7 of the publication. EL students must have full access to high-quality ELA, mathematics, science, and social studies content, as well as other subjects while they are progressing through the ELD level continuums. The California ELD standards correspond with the ELA standards and are designed to apply to English language and literacy skills across all academic content areas, in addition to classes specifically designed for ELD. The ELA standards raise expectations for all students in California. Among other things, students are expected to participate in sustained dialogue on a variety of topics and content areas. They're expected to explain their thinking and build on others' ideas. They're expected to construct arguments and justify their positions persuasively with sound evidence. And they're expected to effectively produce written and oral text in a variety of information and literary text types. EL students must successfully engage in these challenging academic activities while simultaneously developing proficiency in advanced English. The California ELD standards are intended to support this dual endeavor by providing fewer, clearer, and higher standards. Fewer standards are those standards that are necessary and essential for development and success. Clearer standards are a coherent body of standards that have clear links to curriculum and assessments. And higher standards are in alignment with the elevated standards of the ELA standards. The California ELD standards are a powerful tool for supporting EL students' linguistic and academic development. They are insufficient when used alone to achieve their design goals. Therefore, it is important to state explicitly the following purposes for which the ELD standards are not intended and uses that would be inappropriate. The California ELD standards are not to be used in isolation from the ELA standards or other content standards during academic content instruction. Instead, they are designed and should be used as a complement to the ELA standards and other academic content standards. It is fully expected that all EL students will receive high quality instruction based on both the ELA standards and other academic content standards and the California ELD standards. The California ELD standards are not to be used piecemeal at a given proficiency level. To be used appropriately and effectively, the ELD standards articulated in both Part 1, interacting in meaningful ways, and Part 2, learning about how English works, should be used in tandem in strategic and purposeful ways. The California ELD standards are not a curriculum or a curriculum framework. The ELD standards describe what EL students should be able to accomplish if they receive high quality instruction with appropriate scaffolding and instructional materials. The ELD standards do not name a teaching method or the instructional materials to use. And the California ELD standards do not provide an exhaustive list of all the linguist processes and resources that EL students need to develop in order to be successful in school. This is especially the case with regards to disciplinary literacy. The California ELD standards do, however, provide descriptions of knowledge and skills that are essential and critical for development, which teachers and curriculum developers can both unpack and expand upon to provide a comprehensive instructional program for EL students. We continue with Chapter 2, Proficiency Level Descriptors for the California English Language Development Standards, which begins on page 17 of the publication. The California ELD standards and the proficiency levels. You can view the proficiency level descriptors in the California ELD standards publication beginning on page 20. Students come to school with a wide range of language resources from their home or native language. When EL students reach proficiency in English, they should continue to build increasing breadth, depth, and complexity in comprehending and communicating in English in a wide variety of contexts and be lifelong language learners. The model on the slide represents the language proficiency continuum that EL students will experience from learning their native language, progressing through the emerging, expanding, and bridging levels of English language proficiency, and continuing as a lifelong language learner, as indicated by the yellow arrow spanning all the levels and language development experiences. Throughout the student's development, general extent of support ranges from substantial support to moderate, light, and occasional support, as needed and as appropriate for each student. The proficiency level descriptors, or PLDs, for the California ELD standards. The PLDs provide an overview of the stages of ELD through which EL students are expected to progress as they gain increasing proficiency in English as a new language. PLDs depict student knowledge, skills, and abilities across a continuum, identifying what EL students know and can do at early stages and upon exit from each of the three proficiency levels, which are the emerging, the expanding, and bridging levels. The PLDs are intended to be used as a guide for teachers and as differentiated instruction in academic content areas. The three proficiency levels are emerging, expanding, and bridging. At the emerging level, students progress very quickly, learning to use English for immediate needs as well as beginning to understand and use academic vocabulary for other features of academic language. At the expanding level, students are challenged to increase their English skills in more contexts and learn a greater variety of vocabulary and linguistic structures, applying their growing language skills in more sophisticated ways that are appropriate to their age and grade level. At the bridging level, students continue to learn and apply a range of high-level English language skills in a variety of contexts, including comprehension and production of highly technical text. The PLDs identify what a student knows and can do at a particular stage of English language development for each proficiency level across the ELD proficiency level continuum. Okay, now we're going to take some time to pause and reflect about chapters 1 and 2, at least the overview of chapters 1 and 2 of the California ELD Standards publication. So hopefully you have access to chapters 1 and 2 of the ELD Standards, and just take a little bit of time to skim through chapters 1 and 2. Then you're going to respond to the prompt in Padlet. So the prompt is, what is a piece of information you want to know more about? And we're referring back to chapters 1 and 2. So what is a piece of information you want to know more about? So take about a minute or so to skim chapters 1 and 2 and to identify maybe what from those chapters you want to know more about. And then take about another minute to write in Padlet the response to the prompt. So we will post in the chat the page numbers of each chapter. So chapter 1 begins on page 7, and chapter 2 begins on page 17. And then we also will post in the chat the link to Padlet. So now it's your time to skim chapters 1 and 2 and to post a response in Padlet. And Christine, when folks start putting responses in Padlet, can you just let us know so you can share what folks are inputting into the Padlet, please?
I sure will. I see a bunch of people logging in. I see the little thinking at the top. Looking forward to reading some responses.
So as folks are skimming, thank you, Christine. So as folks that are skimming chapter 1, what do you want to know more about? Do you want to know more about the purposes and the intended users? Do you want to know more about the goals of the standards? Do you want to know what is the rationale for the 3 proficiency levels of emerging, expanding, and bridging? That'd be kind of interesting. What else do we want to know about? Do you want to know more about how the standards are organized? How about in chapter 2? Do you want to know more about how the proficiency level descriptors are organized?
Gustavo, let me share. Somebody just posted an incredibly important point, which is how to explain the connection between the ELD proficiency level descriptors, emerging, expanding, and bridging, and LPAC proficiency levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. That is such an important thing to probe into. Oh, somebody else said, somebody's really interested in learning more about using standards to choose curriculum. Since the California ELD standards are not a curriculum or a curriculum framework, well, what should I look for when choosing curriculum to best fit the needs of my English learner students? Such a good question. Oh, somebody else. How do we effectively utilize the ELD proficiency level descriptors to monitor and support ongoing student proficiency in rigorous content area instruction? So important. I want to learn more about the organization of the standards. These are such good points. I want to learn more about the stats and the pace, how students go through the 3 proficiency levels, and how students graduate from one proficiency into the next one. These are such important points. Really appreciate the engagement.
Those are really good, first of all, questions, and also looking at to what's next for some of our folks who are tuned in today. So that's wonderful. Keep on adding your responses to the prompt in Padlet. Padlet's going to be there for you to go back to. Excellent. And so we're going to go ahead and continue moving on with our webinar to the next slide. And so chapter 3, the standards begin on page 25. So when anyone mentions the ELD standards, this is most likely the chapter that everyone thinks of, right? Where the standards are. So this chapter is 119 pages long and contains the ELD standards for K through 12. So what do we want to know from here? What's in this chapter? But first of all, feel free to find the standards for your grade level or a grade level that interests you. So I'm going to present it a little bit more, but you can start looking at what's your grade level standards. The ELD standards at each grade level has 2 sections. Section 1 includes the 2-page at-a-glance overview of the standards. Section 1 displays the ELD standards at a glance, and in the right column, it indicates the ELA standards that correspond to each. Section 2 provides an elaboration of the standards in the 3 parts. So the 3 parts are part 1, interact in meaningful ways. Part 2, learning about how English works. So these are the standards. And then also there's a part 3, which is using foundational literacy skills. So note that the ELD standards in part 1 and part 2 are similar to the ELA anchor standards. And that might even have answered one of the questions that were posed in the Padlet, or at least one of the, what do I want to know more about? Section 2, Part 1 and Part 2 of the standards display the ELD standards along the proficiency level continuum, and that's shown along the top there. The text and discourse in context column on the left shows the corresponding ELA standards and the intended purposes of the ELD standards. In Part 1, the standards are organized by 3 modes of communication: the collaborative, the interpretive, and productive mode of communication. This is a purposeful design of the standards, exemplifying that language is a social function. And in part 2, the standards are organized by 3 modes: structuring cohesive text, expanding and enriching ideas, and connecting and condensing ideas. And part 3 reminds educators to refer to the content standards that build students' foundational literacy skills, right? And that's in the ELA literacy standards. All right, another time to pause and reflect. So we'll take some time to pause and reflect regarding chapter 3, the standards. Select a grade level and skim the standards in part 1 and part 2. So actually start looking at what are those standards in part 1, how many are there, what are they, what do they say for each of the proficiency levels. So do that for part 1 and part 2. And then post in Padlet what you would like to know more about the ELD standards for your grade level, or for the grade level that you selected. So you're going to have 1 minute to skim the standards, part 1 and part 2 of a select grade level that you chose, and about a minute to write in Padlet what you would like to know more about the ELD standards for that grade level. So I taught 3rd grade for a long time, and the last time I taught in the classroom, I was in 2nd grade, so I might select, I'm going to look at the 3rd grade ELD standards. which I would find on page 56 for grade 3. If I'm looking at part one is interacting in meaningful ways. There are 12 standards, I believe. Yes. And as you can see, there's the purple is the collaborative mode of communication. The blue-green is the interpretive, and then the green is productive. And then you have standards like interacting via written English, standard 2, or standard 6, reading and viewing closely. And you can see how the standard is enhancing as we move across the proficiency level continuum. Christine, has anybody posted anything in Padlet?
Yeah, I want to highlight, these are really important points that folks are mentioning. And I see for question 2, someone has posted about linguistic support. The question, what are some examples of appropriate linguistic support? Substantial, moderate, light, and occasional. And that is such an important point because you're looking at general extent of support, that row in the proficiency level descriptors. How does that map onto, let's say I'm teaching, grade 6, I'm looking at 6 through 8, or grade, and I'm asking myself, what does differentiated levels of support across the proficiency levels look like for that grade? So that's such an important point. I just am seeing other great questions. I saw somebody, I want to know more about how to synthesize parts 1 and 2 in lesson planning. I want to know more about the proficiency level descriptors, how to better assist emerging, expanding, and bridging in order for them to move on to the next level and to exit. These are such important points. Thank you for your engagement.
That's wonderful. That's super important. So we'll give folks probably about another few seconds to finish maybe writing an idea. But again, the Padlet is there available for everyone now and even after the closing of the webinar. So we can always go back, and we're going to go back and make sure we read all of these again. So super important. And we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to move on to the next slide. And now we're coming to the beginning of chapters 4, 5, and 6, and that starts on page 145. And I think these are the lonely chapters because I think everybody who has the publication goes to chapter 3 and that's where they're at, and that's fine. But chapters 4 and 5 are designed to be used for professional learning regarding the ELD standards. That's what they were designed for, and that's why they were in the publication. So let's get into it and see what we have here. Chapter 4, Theoretical Foundations and the Research Base of the California ELD Standards. It contains a wide body of scholarship and guidance that inform the development of the California ELD Standards. The research base was relied upon to ensure that the ELD standards highlight and amplify the language demands in the ELA standards that are necessary for the development of advanced English and academic success across disciplines. And just veering off a little bit, somebody said, what if I don't have curriculum? How do I know? If we can identify what are those language demands in whatever we're teaching students in the content area, then we can use the ELD standards to help support us to make sure those students are understanding what that language is so they're able to use it in that content area. So that's one way to kind of look at how we can use these standards. The development of the California ELD standards was informed by multiple theories and a large body of research pertaining to the linguistic and academic education of EL students. Social linguistic, social cultural, social cognitive theories emphasize how learning is a social activity and how language is both a form of social action and a resource for accomplishing things in the world. So again, kind of going back with the importance of these standards. And then with chapter 5, learning about how English works, well, super powerful. This provides an explanation of part 2 of the California ELD standards. So learning about how English works offers kindergarten through grade 12 teachers a new perspective on how to help EL students develop understanding of and proficiency in using academic English. The goal of part 2 is to guide teachers to support EL students in ways that are appropriate to grade level and English language proficiency level so that EL students can unpack meaning in texts that they encounter across the disciplines to better comprehend them, and also to make informed choices about how to use language appropriately based on discipline, based on topic, based on purpose, audience, and task. So when they're producing written text and oral presentations. So super powerful. Students need to know how to use the language. That's the design of the part 2 standards. And so this would be a really interesting chapter to read. Then the next chapter, chapter 6, foundational literacy skills for English learners, which contains research findings and implications for foundational literacy skill instruction for EL students, and general guidance for providing instruction to EL students on foundational literacy skills that are aligned with the reading foundation standards. So I encourage folks to definitely read this chapter and see how it impacts you at the different grade levels. With our newcomer students coming in at the later levels, the question is, well, how much foundational skills and instruction do we provide them when they're at the emerging levels in grade 9? So hopefully this is a chapter you can refer to kind of get a little bit more guidance as to how to be able to support students. So we come to another pause and reflect time. And we're going to do that for chapters 4, 5, and 6. And this time we're going to take a little bit more time. So you can skim through chapters 4, 5, and 6. And we're going to have 2 prompts this time. So the first prompt is, what chapter are you excited to read first? The chapter 4, the chapter 5, chapter 6? And what do you wish to learn more about the ELD standards? And that can be more of a general question. So in Padlet, first post which chapters are you excited to read first, and then also post what you wish to learn more about the ELD standards. And we'll take about a couple minutes for you to skim, and then about 2 minutes to post in Padlet about the chapters you're excited to read first and what you wish to learn more about the ELD standards. And we have put in the chat a link to Padlet, so you can have access to it if you haven't had access to it before. So as we're skimming, it's a lot to skim. I know it's 3 big chapters, but which one? So I'm thinking for myself, I probably would want to go back and read chapter 5, learning about how English works. I always go back and I always learn something new when I go back and read it. So, and especially when we're talking about scaffolding and maybe even providing those supports and what that would look like. So this may be a good chapter to go back and or to kind of read first and see how that can support your development of and design of your instruction for your English learners. And it also has these tables that have some very explicit examples. For example, table 5.4 regarding sentence deconstruction, focusing on structure and meaning, where we have structure, type of clause, and how to know. Where we have the text like broken into clauses, and meaning, what it means. So these could be examples that helps EL students to become more analytical about the language they're learning, right? And really part of what the really goal of the standards are is just to help our students to develop that intentionally that language that they need to meaningfully engage in the English language arts content, and to meaningfully engage in the science content, and to meaningfully engage in the math content, right? With our content teachers, there's a lot of language that they may not know that they can support their EL students with, particularly the discipline focused language about math and science and everything like that. It's just not all in English language arts. So knowing more about the standards and how we can support students in the content areas with the integrated ELD, super important. Christine, has anyone posted any responses in Padlet?
Absolutely. And it brings up an important point. Let me just highlight this. This is the first webinar in a series. There's 4 more coming up, and at the end of the presentation, we're going to highlight the dates and registration. The questions you're posing are so rich and get at the meat of the work, and what you're sharing is going to inform upcoming webinar content. So we're really gauging what folks are bringing into the webinar and then using that to build what the next webinar's, the content of that. I'll just highlight a couple. So I see someone, foundational literacy for students in upper grades. I'm curious about chapter 4 because I am a coordinator and teacher coach. I'd like to know more about how I can support students in grades 6 through 12 with foundational skills, chapter 6, right? So the standards part 3, foundational skills, what's the relationship between that and parts 1 and 2? I would like to read chapter 5. Great. Chapter 5, I think I would benefit the most for my own learning and better support my students. I'm excited to read about chapter 6 first, and I wish to learn about how multilingual students can best learn English using their primary language as a base. Chapter 5, how English works. I'm excited to learn about how English works so that I can better understand the fundamentals of providing support. Chapter 6, theoretical foundations and the research base of the standards. I love to learn more about scaffolding and the importance of vocabulary and discourse. I feel like we take these for granted. We can definitely provide more PD for this important area, these important areas. Too many for me to read off. This is so powerful. Thank you for your engagement in this Padlet.
We love it, and I can't wait to go back and read everything. And of course, it's going to help us as we develop for the future webinars. So really appreciate everyone in your response to these prompts, and just let us know where you're at and where you would like to be at. So we are going to be moving on. We're coming to the end here. So the following are CD web pages and resources that you may consider accessing to support the design and implementation of integrated and designated ELD instruction for your EL students. So you may consider visiting the ELD standards webpage, where you can access, of course, the California ELD standards, and you can access the integrated and designated ELD video series, and the integrating the California ELD standards into K-12 math and science teaching and learning document. That came from the AB 899 study. And you may consider accessing the ELA standards and visiting the ELA ELD framework. I would recommend starting at chapter 2 in the ELD section. I think it's like page 108, something like that. And you may also consider visiting the Optel web page, looking at the Optel tool, and see how that aligns with the ELD standards, and possibly how it could be a tool that you could use at your local level to observe students and their language, the progress of their English language proficiency. And we will post in the chat a link to each of these resources. I know it's a lot. There they go. Excellent. So we're posting in the chat those links. And then while we're posting those, we'll move on to the next slide. And that is, here we go. Thank you. So please join us for more California ELD Standards webinar fun. So all the webinars in this series begin at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The second webinar in the series, which is Professional Learning for Successful Implementation of the California ELD Standards, will deeply cover chapters 4, 5, and 6 through a professional learning lens, and will take place on Wednesday, February 28th, 2024. The third webinar, California ELD Standards Proficiency Level Descriptors, will do a deep dive of chapter 2 and the proficiency level descriptors, and that's going to take place on Wednesday, March 20th, 2024. The fourth webinar in the series, California ELD Standards Part 1, Interacting in Meaningful Ways, will do a deep coverage of Part 1 of the ELD Standards in Chapter 3, and will take place on Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. And the fifth and last webinar in the series, at least for now, the California ELD Standards Part 2, Learning About How English Works, will take place on Wednesday, March 22nd, 2024. And we will post in the chat the registration link to each of the upcoming webinars. So make sure that you register for those future webinars. So this concludes the presentation portion of today's webinar session. So we will now take time to answer questions that you may have. So what questions do you have? Please post your questions in the Q&A, and we will answer as best as we can. So you can post questions now in the using the Q&A feature. Okay, let's see here. All right, thank you, Janet. We look forward to seeing you. Excellent. Thank you, Anna, for that recommendation. Maybe next time we can have, or we can make sure we send everyone a document that has all the links to to what we shared today on today's webinar. So I think we can do that. Thank you, Janet. And if you cannot think of any questions regarding the ELD standards or the publication chapters today, you can, and you think of something tomorrow or next week, you can always send us a question via email at lplo@cde.ca.gov. Let me see, questions here. Do we have any recommendations on what you should do to prepare before the next webinar? If I would just say it might be a good idea maybe just to read the chapters for the next one, chapters 4, 5, and 6. So I think that would be a good start. And then, are the final Optel implementation guidance documents, parent informational tools, and resources available somewhere, which is not the draft? We will need to get back to you on that, Anna, unless Emily can provide a response. And again, if you can't think of any questions now, and you think of a question later, you can always send us a question via our email at lplo.cde.ca.gov.
Thanks, Gustavo. I'm going to chime in really quick and say the Optel user guide is coming soon. It's in its final stages of approval and should be posted within a matter of weeks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alicia. Let me see.
There's a question from Jamie. Do you have any recommendations on what we should do to prepare before the next webinar?
Yes, I read that one already, and my recommendation was to read chapters 4, 5, and 6 in the ELD standards. Thank you. Okay. So let me see, by Anonymous, how do the grade span expectations differ from the PLDs? How does an emerging student look different in 4th or 8th grade? That's an excellent question. I think the PLDs give an overall view of what students should be able to do, but you really would need to look at the specific standards to be able to going back, and with the PLDs, it's also about what they're able to do as they enter that specific proficiency level, and also what they're able to do as they're exiting. So it's really like more a bigger view, but definitely looking at the specific standards for the grade level for those students at those particular levels is what I think it is where you're able to look at what the expectations are for your students. And remember, when we're teaching students during designated ELD, we're teaching them where we want them to get, like what's their next level of progression. And what the level is, that's what they can do independently, right? So when we talk about those levels of supports, is when we're providing that instruction, how are we supporting them so we get them to that next level of the proficiency level descriptor? What's the next skill that they should be able to do independently? So always moving them along that continuum. How would you support schools in prioritizing the ELD standards, like which to start with as an entry point for creating focused language objectives, etc.? How would you support schools in prioritizing the ELD standards? Well, I think the beginning is doing what we're doing here, is making sure that everyone not only is familiar with the ELD standards, because it shouldn't only be the teachers that are providing the ELD. And you have to be all teachers, content teachers who are supporting those students in their content areas. So first of all, knowing about the ELD standards, and then second of all, knowing who your students are and what their language needs are, right? It's looking at the LPAC score, okay, but also what's their performance in the classroom? Where are their strengths, and where do we need to really enhance that instruction for them? So I think that's the 2 points: knowing who your students are, knowing how to use the standards to provide that instruction to move them along that continuum where they can meaningfully engage in the content area. Will the OPTEL be a criteria for reclassification this school year? Emily or Alicia? Do we know that, or is that maybe something we want to get back to Magdalena regarding that question?
Gustavo, would you mind? I can't see that question. Would you mind repeating that one more time?
Yes. Will the OPTEL be a criteria for reclassification this school year?
The OPTEL. We will definitely go into more information on the OPTEL at the upcoming OPTEL webinar. However, we will say that we encourage educators to start using the OPTEL now. We'll provide additional guidance over the course of the next several weeks.
Wonderful. And Emily, if you have that information of where folks can maybe register for the OPTEL webinar, if you want to post that in the chat, that'd be great. Are there any other questions? Wow, let me see. I need to scroll down. Hold on a second here. When and where will the recordings be posted of this webinar? I can tell you where. They're going to be posted on the ELD Standards webpage. So in the ELD Standards tab, where you find the ELD Standards, we're going to put them there. When it's a process, we have to submit this recording. It has to go to our technical folks. It's got to go through CD YouTube. We have to make sure it's 508 compliant. So it takes a little bit of time in the near future, but when we do have it posted, we're definitely going to make a big announcement and let folks, everyone know in the state that we have these recordings posted. Will you be touching upon how to best develop lesson objectives and goals that integrate both the ELA and ELD standards? I think Christine and I can definitely incorporate that into these webinars. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And that's something we are definitely going to try to definitely touch upon. Let me see here. Okay. All the questions and answers went away. I don't know if I did something.
That was me. I was just keeping track of which questions you'd answered live.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move along. We have a couple more slides here. Are there any more questions being posted? Okay, so here we go. Next slide. So last but not least, I would like to give a big thanks to my colleagues from the LPLO for providing webinar technical support today. So we appreciate their expertise and their time to support the presentation of today's webinar. And that's Lori Kelling, she's the Education Program Consultant in the Language Policy and Leadership Office. Thank you, Lori. And Emily Ingram, also an Education Programs Consultant in the Language Policy and Leadership Office. We're an awesome team, and because of them, so I appreciate you supporting us and the technical and everything and all the day-to-day. So thank you so much. And I don't see any more questions, so here we go to the last slide on behalf of my co-presenter, Christine, and the administrators and staff from the Multilingual Support Division and the Region 15 Comprehensive Center at West Ed. We thank you all for joining us today. So we hope it was a useful session for you. And the next webinar session is on February 28th at 3:30 p.m. And we hope to see you all there. Thank you. Good night.